everyone, it's Ellie here, and welcome back to my build log for my Hero Ray costume. I'm really excited to be almost done with this outfit. It's taken a lot of time and work, and sometimes I lose motivation to work on outfits, and this has kind of been one of those. I want to get it done and I want to wear it, but I don't really want to sew it. So it's been taking a while for me to get these videos out and for me to actually make a costume I'm proud of, but we're really getting there. We're so close, I can almost taste it. So today we're going to be working on the wraps and the obi for Hero Ray. So let's go ahead and get started. So the first thing we want to work on are the wraps, since this is going to be adding some bulk around that waistline and we want to make sure our obi will fit. So the wraps are made out of a cotton gauze, so that way there's just a little bit see-through like they are in the movie. I think one of the reasons I got a little demotivated with this costume is I've been searching for the right color gauze for months. I started this costume in January. It's now June and I've just picked out my gauze. But unfortunately, the color still wasn't quite right, and while I didn't want to have to dye any fabric for this, it turns out that I had to. So we're going to be making a dye bath for this gauze. I'm using black liquid dye from RIT. This is a great dye to use for cottons and things like that. It won't dye polyester, so don't even try it. It won't work very well. So I fill up my bath with warm water as well as some salt, and then I pour my dye in. Make sure you're wearing gloves while you're working with this. Have any sort of ventilation on that you can, or are wearing a face mask. It can be somewhat toxic and you don't want to be breathing a whole lot of it in. So I swoosh around my wraps for a while until I feel they've soaked up most of the color, and then I will rinse them out with cold water. Cold water will help lock in the dye rather than warm water, which would keep it activated and wash it out of your material. So after I've rinsed it to where the water coming off of my material is clear again, I put it in my dryer and I dry it up. Of course, I notice after I've taken it out of my dryer, it's still a little bit too light for my tastes, so I do another dye bath. I didn't record this one, but I actually did this one in my kitchen sink and inside a garbage bag, just because I wanted something that was a little bit easier to clean up. So I put the water and the dye inside of my garbage bag and was able to swish around my material in there while it was in my sink. It was honestly a great way to dye my material, and I would definitely do it again next time. So once it's all been dyed, I need to stitch my two pieces together so I can get one long length of material. I believe the screen accurate costume has no seams on the gauze wraps, but I decided to save a little bit of money and buy half as much material as I needed so I could cut it in half and stitch it together. I'm doing a French seam here so that way there are no open edges. And now comes the very, very tedious part. I want to finish these edges on these wraps, but I don't want to do it by machine because I don't want it to be a visible stitch. So I am going to go ahead and blind stitch all 7 yards times 2 plus a little bit, so 14 yards of blind stitching. This did take me quite a while, and some of my stitches got a little sloppy, but thankfully you can't tell when it's worn or on a mannequin, and it looks pretty darn good, so I'm pretty happy with it. But you could always leave this a raw edge or finish it some other way rather than doing a blind stitch if you're on a crunch for time or honestly just don't feel like putting in that much time. If I were to do it again, I would probably leave that as a raw edge because I don't see a whole lot of a difference when it's on the dress form. Now that we've hemmed all of our wraps, we can go ahead and put them on the dress form. We're going to wrap them around until we're happy with it. Once we're happy with where they're sitting, we can blind stitch the gathers onto the shoulders. This way they don't slip around or anything. And once those are gathered by hand, I'm also going to go onto the inside, put a strip of bias tape, and then I'm going to put 2 snaps, which will snap onto the tunic. That way, again, they don't shift around while we're wearing them. I see a lot of Rays who complain about their gauze wraps falling off their shoulders or just not sitting right in all their photos or during action shots, which is why I decided to put these snaps to hold them into place. I also don't want to be wrapping my gauze by hand every time I wear it. So I put a piece of bias tape around the entire waistline, and I stitched all of my gauze wraps onto that strip of bias tape. So that way it can be worn kind of like a belt, and it will also hold them in place. They won't be shifting around underneath my obi. So speaking of, it's time to move on to the obi. For the obi, I got this cool gray, very textured linen. It's kind of like something you would find on a suit jacket. I cut one very long and very wide strip of this material. And then I'm also using a duck canvas for my backing, which I cut a strip of the same length, but a lot less wide. We're going to do what's called a self-gathering obi. This is something that a lot of members of the Rebel Legion use to make their Jedi costumes. You might also notice that I've tapered one of the edges of my obi. Rey's obi does look like it's wrapped around a little bit, and you can see some extra edges. So I didn't want to make one that was completely flat. I wanted to have a little bit extra dimension. So I do taper one of the edges of that obi. So the way it works is you have a structure layer, which is the proper size of what you want your obi to be, and then you have your fashion fabric, which is a lot larger. We're going to connect the two layers with right sides together and stitch along the edge. We're going to make sure that the edge of our obi material matches up with the edge of our backing material. So we have kind of like a pocket or some extra floof in the middle. When we get to the end of the obi, we're going to gather our fashion material and stitch it onto our backing material. This will help create our ruching and our gathering on our obi. So once that's all stitched, we're gonna flip it inside out, and you'll see it's kind of just a bubble. It's a mess. It doesn't look very good. But I'm gonna hit it with my iron real quick, and as I'm doing that, I kind of move the material around and keep it looking natural and organic. And then it looks great. It looks gathered and ruched, but completely natural. And since I've ironed it, it's gonna stay in place. So it's looking awesome. I was pretty proud about this. I've never made a self-gathering obi before, so I'm glad that it turned out exactly the way I wanted it to. To put our obi on, I'm going to be using some snaps. I love snaps. I think they're really great. They're easy to adjust if you need to and things like that. So I'm going to put 2 snaps on the tapered edge of my obi, and then I'm also going to put those on the part where it will connect on the right side of the obi. And then on the bigger fat side of the obi that I did not taper, I'm also gonna put 2 snaps on those corners and connect that to the inside of the obi, just for some extra strength and security. This is gonna be going over a lot of layers and in a part of your body where you're moving a lot. So you wanna make sure it's going to be extra secure and it's not gonna just pop off. And with our obi attached and everything on our dress form, our costume is looking amazing. It is almost done. There's just little odds and ends, like some leather goods and her arm wraps, the wig, just little itty bitty things that are left. But otherwise, it looks like Rey. It looks so good. I am just amazed with how it's looking, and it's really inspiring me to finish it up. As you guys know, Anime Expo is coming up in a few weeks, and I'm hoping to be able to wear Rey there, along with my Kylo Ren Ita bag. So if you are going, make sure to drop me a message and I'll see if I can find you. As always, thank you so much for tuning in, and I hope to see you next week. Keep sewing, stay positive, and have fun. I'll see you all later. Bye!